a lot of people and experts talking about the crisis of democracy. Do you think it exists?
Yes, I think that we are struggling all over the world in the democracies to really stay focused on the truth. We are losing access, if you will, to objective truth. There are so many media outlets that are actually advertisements for a particular point of view, and it is becoming more difficult for citizens in the United States, and I think in the Western world, to really look to media as an objective source of information. Because in the United States, for example, there are now outlets like Newsmax, and Newsmax is basically a mouthpiece for the Trump view of the world, and it is not really an attempt being made to be objective in the presentation of news. And there are other outlets that are on the left, if you will, that are similar. So historically in our country, we were able to look to media outlets as a source of objective information. And that is becoming harder to do in the United States today. And I think it's true around the world.
Yeah, sadly, but thanks.
Yeah.
And do you think the Ukrainians have a good strategy for negotiations internationally? And what do you think can be changed to reach out to Americans specifically?
Yeah, well, I give President Zelensky very high marks in terms of what he has accomplished as far as really presenting the Ukrainian cause to the world. He has done an outstanding job of really motivating global support for Ukraine, in the United States, in Europe, and around the world. And so I give him a lot of credit for what he has been able to accomplish in terms of motivating world support since February of 2022.
Yeah, and what do you think about the NATO, the path to NATO of Ukraine? Why aren't we there?
Well, I think that the door to NATO should remain open, and I think that the door to the European Union should remain open. I hope that the European Union will either admit Ukraine as a full member of the European Union or negotiate agreements with the European Union that will be very close to full membership in the European Union. And I think that the issue of NATO membership is one that should be negotiated at a conference table as we end this war. And I think that's a matter that should be left for the diplomatic resolution of this war.
Yeah. And what the US think about our reforms?
Well, I think that all countries have space for improvement.
Yeah,
and our country does, Europe does, Ukraine does. But I think that Ukraine has made significant progress in terms of reforming the judicial system, reforming just the relationship between government and business, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and what do you think we need to improve to go to NATO, for example, or to get more aid from the Western countries? Or maybe they all are just afraid of Russia, so that's why they don't do that.
Well, one of the most important things that Ukraine must do is constantly remind the world that this war in Ukraine is a war about Ukraine's self-defense. And we should never tire of reminding the world that Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine did not invade Russia. The Ukrainian people are morally justified in defending their families, their children, their grandchildren, their homes, their communities, and their country. And I think that the moral clarity of this war is unique. Oftentimes in war, there's a lot of moral ambiguity. And you know, they talk about the fog of war. But in this conflict, I think it is, the moral clarity is absolute. I mean, it is the Russian army that has occupied Ukrainian territory. It is Putin's friends that have started this conflict, and they're going to have to figure out how to end it. And one of the things that has been most troubling to me about this is the fact that the religious leaders in Ukraine, Kirill in particular, has blessed this conflict. And I find that just outrageous.
Yeah, sadly. And what do you think about Zelensky's formula for peace? And will the peace be achieved by this formula? How do you think?
Well, I think that his formula for peace is a reasonable one, and it's one that we should support, and it's one that is hopefully a place to start negotiations. And I think we're at a point where it would be in everybody's best interest to have a ceasefire and then try to find a negotiated diplomatic solution to this conflict. And the sooner we can get to the negotiating table, the better. And stop the killing, and let's try to get reasonable people at a negotiating table to find a solution to this conflict that would result in Ukraine's security, long-term security, and a solution that would also guarantee the territorial integrity of this country. And that's going to be hard to do, I understand, but I think we're at a point where it would be in everybody's interest to stop the firing, stop the shooting, and try to find some kind of a diplomatic solution to this problem.
And the last question for you. How do you think, what is the victory of Ukraine? What is this exactly?
What does victory look like?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think it's important for the people of Ukraine and the people of the world to understand that to date, Ukraine has won this war. And let's not lose sight of that basic fact. Vladimir Putin and his friends, when they invaded this country, I'm convinced that they believed that President Zelensky and the government here was going to run. They were going to flee the country, and that they were going to be able to occupy Kiev very quickly, and they were going to be able to put former President Yanukovych back in power and have his former government basically reinstalled here in Kiev. And that was the way they were going to really take over Ukraine. Well, that effort has failed thanks to the heroic efforts of Ukrainian people and to the incredible efforts made by the Ukrainian military to destroy those Russian tanks that were coming toward Kiev. And so my point is that to date, the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian government, they have won this war. They have prevented Putin from achieving his objective. And it's important for us to understand that. It's important for us never to lose sight of the fact that the Ukrainians have also done a remarkable job of reopening the Black Sea and moving grain out through the Black Sea and the Danube. And so there have been tremendous achievements on the part of Ukraine to this point. I don't think anybody can look at this conflict since February of 2022 and conclude that the Russians have won. They have not. Ukrainians have won this phase of the war.
But how do you think it should look in the future, like after negotiations? What?
I think that the objective should be to reestablish the borders of Ukraine that existed before this war started. But I also understand that it's going to be the Ukrainian people that are going to ultimately make those decisions. And I will say that if I had one piece of advice for President Zelensky, it would be to study carefully Winston Churchill's efforts during World War II and what he did to rally the people of the United Kingdom, and specifically the fact that he had a war cabinet that was composed of all of his political opponents. And I think that President Zelensky needs to do more to be reaching out to all different factions here in Ukraine to build a unity government, if you will, so that when they do get to the negotiating table, that there will be a united Ukrainian position. That's going to be extremely important, and it's going to be extremely difficult to achieve that, and it's going to require a whole different set of political skills than just communicating on television to the world like President Zelensky has effectively done. He's done a brilliant job of that. Now, the skills that are going to be required are very, very sophisticated political skills that are going to be essential to pulling together all the different political factions within Ukraine. When we get to the negotiating table, and we're going to get to a negotiating table, all wars ultimately end at a table, okay? But when we get there, it's going to be extremely important for all political factions in Ukraine to be united in their position.
That's a really good point. Thank you for this interesting conversation. It's all for me.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Slava Ukraine.